Hello everyone. This is Ken here, Basketball Rewind. I'm here. I'm going to talk about two different topics today. The KD potential trade that is looming and could happen. I'm going to talk about it from a league-wide perspective as well as from a Raptor perspective. I'm also going to talk about the trade that just happened, that just officially finished, getting confirmed, which is Desmond Bane to the Orlando Magic. Now I'm going to cover that one first because it has draft implications more so than a hypothetical trade does. So let's just go through it really quickly. Orlando Magic acquire probably the best fit for what they need as a roster. I know some people feel like they need another star or whatever, but he really is. I mean, if you remember in the last offseason, they were going for a guy like Klay Thompson. And Desmond Bane does what Klay Thompson hypothetically would have done, but he's younger, healthier. I won't say he's better than prime Klay Thompson, but he's probably better than Klay Thompson right now, especially on the defensive end. And he's just a really solid guy. The Magic are going to be sending the Grizzlies the 16th overall pick in this year's draft, where I think there is another drop-off in terms of the tiers of the draft. Still a really solid pick, kind of get the best of the rest, so it's a very interesting pick position. They're also sending along with that 3 additional picks, and I believe a swap that is lightly protected. I'm not going to go through the details of the protections on the swap, but instead, I'm going to just focus on the other picks. They have the unprotected Phoenix Suns 2026, so next year's first round pick. They also are sending their 2028 and 2030 first round pick. I believe, as far as I know, please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but those are unprotected, and the protections are mainly on the other, on the swap. Now, here's the interesting thing about all of that. First of all, the swap is going to be really, really good. The Phoenix pick could be potentially really, really good. That swap alone is the worst of, I believe, Washington and I think it's Washington and another team. The team is escaping me right now, but it's a really good pick swap, and it's potentially going to be a lottery pick. And it's going to be the worst of, I think it's Washington and Phoenix, but don't quote me on that. Now, the interesting thing is mainly what did they give up? And I think it is a little bit of an overpay. However, I like the aggressiveness of, and sorry about the noise in the background, I'm outside. I do like the aggressiveness from the Orlando Magic GM, Jeff Weltman, to say, you know what, the East is, I don't think the East is as weak as people suggest it is. But I do think that the East is, like, punching up in the East is possible. The Orlando Magic were a top 4 team at parts of the season for good stretches of the season before they had injuries to guys like Suggs. I think that they see Suggs as part of the future, and I think that's the right decision. Someone like a Desmond Bane really helps to just fill in the gaps. They need another offensive person who can punch up. And there have been years where he's punched up into the 21, 23 point range on a night-to-night basis. And so I think that it helps there without having decreases in the defense. He basically gives you what they were hoping they would get from KCP, locked down for a good amount of time, and a much younger person. Desmond Bane has been through some battles, he's been through some wars in the playoffs, and he's performed during those times. So I think it's a really good overall player that they got. I think it fits, and I think that they are now a dangerous team. The only thing is that giving up those later first rounders is tough. However, if they feel like they can punch up, then it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, that's what you're punching up for. So I think that there's arguments for both. I like the player, I like the acquisition, but I do think it is a little bit of an overpay. If I were to grade the deal, as people like to grade deals right off rip, maybe like a B. I can't give it a B+. It's too early yet. I wouldn't give it an A because I think it's a little bit of an overpay. I wouldn't give up that many picks. Now, One thing that's interesting is why did they give up 4 picks? So people are going to compare it to other deals. I think every single deal needs to be looked at and contextualized for that specific deal. What makes this deal one that, even though it is an overpay, you can understand why they would give up at least, say, 3 picks, et cetera, is because they recently signed KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. That is a contract that did not end up producing how they were hoping it would produce. This is the nicest way that I can put it. He wasn't terrible this year, but nowhere close to where they thought that they, to the player that they thought that they were going to get. It's not the longest term deal, which is good, but that's also why it's easy. Now, from the Memphis point of view, they're now retooling their team, probably around Jaren Jackson Jr., but we'll see. Of course, Ja is still there for now. You could see them go in a different way, but for them to get involved in other trades, I did look. There are pathways for them to get guys like Grayson Allen or whatever, but they have a lot of prospects, and they don't really have a lot of the salaries, unless they're going to trade one of the guys that I just mentioned, Triple J or Ja, to be able to get in the mix for other things. However, they do have the picks. So there are some consolidation moves or some cleanup moves that they could do to really solidify, what the direction of their team is going forward. But right now, off rip today, they can go into the season and they have a relatively complete team if they wanted to. I'm sure that they will make moves. I haven't had a chance to really sit down and think who is the best draft pick for them, because they have a lot of wings. Jake LaRavia was someone that they traded recently, who's going to be a free agent. I would love my team to potentially target him. But even beyond Jake LaRavia, who is no longer a Memphis Grizzly, there are some guys that are up and coming that also deserve the minutes, like Jalen Wells, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I think that kind of concludes it. That covers it. If you have any thoughts, leave them down in the comments below. So yeah, now moving on to the KD section. Okay, let's take a second. Okay, so KD is interesting because we have to contextualize this just like everything else. Phoenix wasted no time recently firing their coach. They reassigned their current or former GM, I should say, James Jones, whose contract is going to be expiring at the end of June. So he's not fired, but he's reassigned. He's no longer the GM, and they have someone, Brian Gregory, I believe, is the current acting GM. And so that means that Matt Ishbia, the current owner of the Magic, who has always shown a little bit of competitiveness. He's talked about how he's not very much a patient man. I don't think that they're trying to make moves to be bad for long or anything of that nature. They paid a lot to get Kevin Durant. I believe it was, I have the transaction here, Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, 4 first-rounders, and 1 pick swap in 2 seconds. That is a lot to give up for Kevin Durant at the time. In my mind, that wasn't the move that really killed them. It was actually the subsequent move, the secondary move, to go trade Chris Paul for Bradley Beal, which hampers them. They are currently a second apron team. So they're a second apron team. Their owner is impatient, and he's not happy with how they performed because, again, a couple picks after us, I think it might even be the pick directly after the Raptors, the 10th pick, is the Phoenix Suns pick. However, it's not owned by the Phoenix Suns. They don't have a lot of draft capital. That is primarily owned by Houston and I guess now the Memphis Grizzlies for next year. And, they are a very expensive team, which also hampers their ability to pull off trades. Being a second apron team means that you cannot aggregate multiple salaries in a deal to go get a player. So, lo and behold, they have Kevin Durant. Bradley Beal has a no trade clause, so he's not going anywhere unless he wants to go somewhere. So that leaves Kevin Durant making $54.7 million as he enters in the final year of his expiring deal. I have heard reports, so I'm going to now talk about report stuff. Heard reports that Kevin Durant is looking for a potential extension with whoever he is traded for in the neighborhood of between 120, and I believe the max he can be paid, depending on if he waits 6 months and then signs an extension, is 124. Sorry. So you're looking at a minimum of $60 million per year. Beyond that, now, will he actually get that extension? I don't know. You get what you have the leverage to negotiate. However, I will add, before we get into like trade packages, who are the suitors, etc., the deal with Kevin Durant, which is very, very interesting to me, is this. Kevin Durant may not have the leverage that he thinks he has, because him being 37, him being on quite a number of teams across the past decade, like say 4 teams across 10 years, I believe, or something like that, these things start to add up negatively in your favor, even though offensively, per certain metrics, he is a 97th percentile offensive player. Defensively, he is no longer a net positive. However, we can kind of contextualize that by saying he was playing beside Nurkic and Bradley Beal, who've never really been good defensive players. I know that Bradley Beal at one time had that reputation, but not really. Not in my mind. So I think that kind of covers the overall point of view from the Suns. They want to get off this contract and retain certain things or assets as they both reduce and shed salary, but also maintain some sort of flexibility for winning down the road. I don't think that they're looking for a whole bunch of draft picks, but I don't think they're opposed to a draft pick in this year's draft. I should add that. The suitors, is the interesting thing, include the Houston Rockets, San Antonio, Minnesota Timberwolves, Miami Heat, and Toronto Raptors. In general, from the reports, it has been reported that his preferred destination is probably one of the Texas teams, primarily Houston. We will see. I think it also depends on who's willing to pay him, but if he's not willing to commit, that changes things. So I'm going to shift tone here and kind of focus on which teams should trade for him. Minnesota is an interesting one. I think if they're using it to get off Rudy Gobert, because the Phoenix Suns have suggested that they want someone other than, like, well, I guess they traded Nurkic, but someone other than Nick Richards to man the middle and kind of get back to more of a well-balanced team. The Timberwolves have that. They have the right salary in Rudy Gobert to help facilitate a deal and other things. Now, they've been reluctant to put Jaden McDaniels in the deal. Totally understand that, because Kevin Durant is not defending like, net positive right now, as of this past year. These are times where perception does become a little bit of reality in terms of how they're negotiating in a trade. Houston Rockets are another interesting thing, because they can trade what is needed to go get a Kevin Durant and still retain a lot of flexibility and assets down the road. I will get to the packages later. So those are kind of the two teams that I think are more interesting. There is a case for San Antonio if they're willing to give up the 14th pick and not the second pick. I would not give up the second pick for a 37-year-old Kevin Durant. The nice thing is that, again, I don't think he has the leverage to command $60 million on his next contract. However, if you can sign him for 40, which sounds like a lot, but it's still way, that saves you $15 million, $15 million. And then you combine that with cap raises. Now you've gotten the talent upgrade, you've maintained flexibility and moving forward. And if you haven't given up too much, which the Spurs wouldn't in this case, you can actually go and get a talent upgrade. The challenge is that the Phoenix Suns don't like Devin Vassell, or they are seemingly not interested in it. So I think that's one of the things. I'll get to the Raptors in a second. But yeah, I think the kind of role that he's going to be looking at is he's going to play the role of almost like an ultimate closer of sorts for many of these teams. Scoring from anywhere on the court is just not a problem. Even at 37, he's just, even with the leg injuries, even last year he played 58 games or whatever. It's a situation whereby Kevin Durant is still that level of player offensively. So he's still really, really good. So I can understand why teams want to get him. Also, just from a superstar standpoint and like what that does to a market, having a Kevin Durant, the jersey sales, all that type of all-encompassing thing and enterprise, that is something that will appeal. So on the West, I would say that there are teams that, like I said, San Antonio, Houston, that want to consolidate assets. In the East, there's teams like Toronto and Miami that more so want to potentially maintain a little bit of long-term financial flexibility from, looking 3 years out, and yet he might be your chance to punch up in the East that is seemingly a weak East. Okay, what are the packages? Kevin Durant. These are packages, I didn't build them. They're just someone post them online, think that they make a lot of sense. So I'm just going to name out potential packages. So with the T-Wolves, it'd be Gobert, Dante DiVincenzo, Rob Dillingham, which is an interesting one, or Terrence Shannon Jr., I believe his name is. Their later pick from this past year, and a future first round pick. I think that's not a bad trade because you're getting some guys that can compete. You're getting some young prospects, but it's not a full rebuild team. The Spurs would be Devin Vassell, more than likely. Sohan and Harrison Barnes are the 14th pick. Decent package. Don't know how they see Devin Vassell, who right now is probably not the best defender, but offensively he can kind of punch up here and there, and he can do some stuff. And you're not downgrading to the point where this guy's a complete unknown. You kind of know what he is. And of course, Harrison Barnes is a solid player. It's not great, but it's if you really are targeting someone at that number 14th pick, I think it's interesting. I'm not going to really focus on who I think that they should. From a Phoenix perspective, who's ultimately going to get him, but I would say though the Rockets have the best overall offer that they can put in the trade. So that would be Jabari Smith, potentially Jalen Green. I mean, there's a chance that they could put Şengün, but I don't know if I see that. Although they did just re-sign Steven Adams, and it does sound like they are going to figure something out with Fred, with him being on that team for a longer period of time. As well as they have a first round pick, so they could actually give Phoenix their first round pick for this year. There's the 10th pick, boom, done. Or they could give them future picks, some of which include Phoenix's own future picks. So Phoenix is obviously going to do what's best for what their franchise is, because Durant has won a chip there, and he's not like a homegrown talent there, right? So it's a little bit of a different situation than like a Giannis. The Heat could offer Wiggins, Jovic, Jaime Jaquez, and a first-round pick. I don't like this for the Heat as much, even though it's an overall talent upgrade from Wiggins. I think the challenge that you're looking at is that the Heat, if it's not successful with the Heat, it's a hard way to pivot out of that. So, and I think Bam is a really good piece to have behind a Kevin Durant. So, they're very interesting. I don't love the deal. I don't love it for anything, but yeah. For Toronto, it would probably be RJ Barrett. Probably a future pick, or at least a pick swap. And Jakob Poeltl. It would probably have to, given what I'm seeing the T-Wolves' potential assets could be, you're probably looking at least a pick in the future. So I put together just a mock thing just for the sake of it. So it'd be like RJ Barrett, Jakob Poeltl, Ochai Agbaji, and maybe like a pick swap, unprotected, or a, you could always just give them a lot of seconds in lieu of a first. I would try, if I'm the Raptors, I would hold back on giving a first, is what I'm trying to say. If I'm any of these teams, I'd hold back on giving a first, to be perfectly honest. But if they have to throw in a first, then I guess that is part of the deal. So I'll just leave that where it is. Right now, Timberwolves seem to be the friskiest for this type of deal. A-Rod reportedly has recently talked to Kevin Durant personally. And A-Rod, of course, Rodriguez, I think, the baseball player, of course, Shark Tank guy. He is someone who is very, very much not really willing to be patient, especially since he recently became part of that ownership group that has now taken control of the Timberwolves. I see the Timberwolves probably doing this, or Houston. It's just the easiest, cleanest. From a Raptors perspective, I know that there's some people that want a deal done, but if you do a deal with the Raptors, what I'll say is you will have to retain that number 9 pick, because it will make it easier to retain or acquire a center, either via the draft or otherwise. That draft, it couldn't be Derek Queen. I'll just say that. It would have to be Malawatch more than likely. There's an argument for Sorber, but I think Malawatch would make the most sense. The challenge of that, though, is, again, how do I put this? It's Kevin Durant, yes, but he's 37 years old. I've seen Toronto try to acquire talent that are around the same age, actually, 37, 38, 39. That would be Hakeem Olajuwon. I hope that if they do acquire Kevin Durant, that it doesn't become a Hakeem Olajuwon type of situation, because those were not his best years. I get that it's a different type of player style. He's not like down low, but 37 with a lot of knee issues is tough, especially. This is what I was saying to people, like, you should not be giving up picks for this if you can't get a commitment on him re-signing and knowing what that commitment is and planning for that, because without that commitment of him signing, you're just throwing away your future for 1 year of a guy. And if you're the Raptors specifically, you're a 30-win team. How many additional wins does Brandon Ingram and Kevin Durant add? They add wins, but there's still a huge unknown. So that's kind of my thoughts. I will be talking about this more, at least the Orlando aspect of it, in a upcoming pod that I'm going to film later with not a new special guest, but with a guest, of course, and with Coach Roach and with Beyond. So we'll get more thoughts about that. Definitely some fun stuff to talk about. But again, yeah, like from a Raptors perspective, I can understand them doing this, but if you're basically paying to get off RJ and Pirtle's potential to sign a player option just for a guy who is going to expire and potentially bounce, that does not seem like a good idea. Some people will say trust in Masai. If that's your thing, cool. I don't really feel like blindly trusting or whatever anyone really. So I would just say like if I were the Raptors, and I'm not Nostradamus, but based on how I think that the summer may go, because the Bucks are reportedly going to try to build a team out with Giannis, even though Brook Lopez is leaving, I would keep my eyes set on Giannis, be patient, and I would wait for Canada Day and see what happens. That's what I would do. I would try to not give up too much for Kevin Durant. It's not the worst move in the world. I don't know if it's the best move. For other teams, might be. So, that's Basketball Rewind. It's been a good episode. Get some sunshine. People stay well, stay safe, and take care. Like, comment, and subscribe. And peace.